Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here tonight. You folks have been making this a part of your regular week, so many of you inviting us into your home every week now, and we have our friends Norbert Hornstein and Morris Pearl, the head of the Patriarch Millionaires, and Monina Van Opel and Mary Geisman, and Doug Krieger and Kim Miller and Richard Master and Steve Walker, and a ton of others, and Jerry Midas that have been on almost every single one of these calls. So thank you so much. And then we have folks for the first time joining us as well. So regardless, thank you for being here with us. We are very excited to have Mike Siegel with us tonight, running in Texas's 10th Congressional District. We'll also have Greg Casar. He's an Austin City Council member joining us as well, and he'll briefly tell you a little bit more about why this district needs Mike right now. So before I turn it over to our co-founder, Adam Green, I want to quickly share a few programmatic notes. I know you all are pretty familiar because many of you have been here every week, but very quickly, we want this call to be interactive. I think most of you feel comfortable, so please go ahead and turn your videos on so we can all see each other. We will, when you're ready to ask your question, please feel free to do this at any point. Just go down to the very bottom of your screen. You'll see a chat icon, and then you'll just go ahead and find Rachel, PCC host, and chat me your question. Again, please send that at any point. Mike is eager to answer your questions. So please bear with me and forgive me in advance. I'm going to try my very best to get all of your questions, and Mike wants to hear them and answer them. But I promise if we don't, I will make sure to stick my email in the G chat, and we will get your question answered. So we'll also be recording this, so in case you have to jump off or you're joining us a little bit later, no problem. We'll send you the full recording so you can watch it at your leisure later as well. So as you know, these Zoom video calls don't cost anything, but we really do hope that if you feel inspired by what you hear from Mike tonight, that you'll consider chipping in to helping fuel his campaign. Every dollar counts. It'll be maximized by Mike's campaign, and we would greatly appreciate if that's something you will consider. So with that, let me go ahead and kick it over to our co-founder, Adam Green. Adam?
All right. Thanks, Rachel. Thank you for joining us, Mike. And thanks to everybody who is spending your next hour with us. We've heard from we've had a lot of great progressive victories this year. Marie Newman actually defeated a conservative Democratic incumbent in Illinois. We heard on one of these Meet the Candidate calls from Cara Eastman, who won an important primary in Nebraska's 2nd District. We've heard on these calls from Jabal Bowman and Mondaire Jones in New York City, as well as Dana Balter in upstate New York, all three of whom we predict will win big victories this coming Tuesday. And I would like to offer a prediction before introducing Mike, which is that this Tuesday, with those New York victories, we're also predicting a victory for Charles Booker, which will just be huge in Kentucky Senate race. We're going to have what I would call a springboard effect for progressives. We're going to have so many progressive victories that activists across the country are going to be like, well, that was great. Now what do we do? Where can we fight now? And the good news is there are more really important primaries around the corner. The following week after New York, there's actually a really competitive Colorado Senate race. And then we get to Texas, where there's some really important House races. These are runoff elections, the two top most vote-getting people being on the ballot. And that's where Mike Siegel comes in. Mike came within 4 points of knocking off a Republican incumbent in 2018 with pretty much no institutional support. Very much like our friend Cara Eastman, who came 1 point away with no institutional support. And this year, he is back to finish the job. He came in first place in the original election a couple of months ago, despite being outspent, I believe, around $2 million by one of his opponents. And he enters this primary in really strong position. If you're all like us, you really care about democracy issues. And we're getting more and more paranoid about what Republicans will try to do to mess with the upcoming election. And this is something that Mike can speak a lot about. When Republicans locally tried to restrict voting rights in Texas, Mike fought back against them and actually prevailed. And when the Republicans shut down various voting sites earlier this year, Mike took the fight to them and sued the Secretary of State. So he's very much out there on a lot of these core existential democracy issues. On some of our other progressive core issues, Medicare for All, Green New Deal, he's with us, and his runoff opponent has called Medicare for All and the Green New Deal fool's gold and selling false hope to people. Something that we often hear from people who aren't trying hard enough. We are proud that we have about 1,000 members in the district. We're proud that about 600 PCCC members so far have donated to Mike's campaign. We want to get that to at least 1,000 donations in short order. And we're thrilled to be supporting someone who, like my parents, is a former public school teacher, someone who's really will be with us as a partner in the trenches in the fights ahead. So, Mike, we're just so thrilled at the type of campaign you're running. I think after this coming Tuesday, you will be right in the center of people's focus, and we're thrilled to give everybody on this call a sneak preview of your candidacy. So we'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about your race and why people who are being bombarded from so many angles with so many candidates and so many issues should be paying attention to your district in particular. Mike?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Adam and Rachel. It's an honor to be with you and really honored to have the support of the PCCC. And so I'm Mike Siegel, Democrat for Congress here in the Texas 10th. I'm a former public school teacher, union organizer, most recently a civil rights lawyer and a city attorney for the city of Austin. And I'm running on a progressive platform to fight for equal opportunity and social justice and to replace one of the wealthiest and most conservative members of Congress, Michael McCall, here in the Texas 10th. And I'm really coming at this as an organizer. I grew up in an organizing family. My mom was a machinist, a shop steward in the machinist union. My dad's a longtime labor lawyer. And I've always been a part of social movements. When I was a teacher, I was organizing in my classroom, fighting against the privatization of public education. As a civil rights lawyer, I took on movement cases, suing a city to stop a racist police policy, joining together with the Austin City Council and Mayor to sue Governor Abbott to stop a Show Me Your Papers anti-immigrant law here in Texas. And I've really tried to bring that spirit of organizing and serving the community to my campaign. And like you mentioned, Adam, in 2018, I didn't get a lot of institutional support, but we did bring the organizing game, and we mobilized over 1,000 volunteers, made over 300,000 voter contacts, and turned what was a gerrymandered, safe Republican seat where this guy McCall, who's worth $300 million, was winning his elections by 20 and 30%. And we got that down to 4% in one cycle. And obviously gave our donors a huge bang for the buck, basically on about $400,000 in general election spending made up this huge difference. And so I'm running again to finish the job bigger and better with a lot more support because we've proven the concept. We've proven that we can win. And I would say this is a tremendous opportunity. This is a district that actually unites two of the progressive hearts of Texas, Austin and Houston. And so when they drew the map, 16 years ago, it was just going to have 25% of Austin and then 7 rural counties and a little slice of the Houston suburbs. But as the metro areas have grown, this has become much more fertile ground for Democrats. And we showed last cycle by organizing on local issues. I think the biggest victory we had was the Black students at Prairie View A&M, an historically Black college, were told on the eve of the voter registration deadline in 2018 that they couldn't vote on campus. And we got involved, actually had a staffer who was arrested while delivering a demand letter. And we ended up going on the Rachel Maddow show and telling the story and actually got the state to reverse its decision and let the students vote on campus. And we've tried to bring that similar kind of approach of service and organizing locally and raising national issues. We've been fighting on a Green New Deal in Texas, which if you talk to some of the consultants, I'm sure Adam has met some of these folks, they'll say, oh no, don't say those words, don't say Green New Deal, you're in a swing district. But we found is that by advocating for these progressive policies that essentially meet the needs of the crises we are facing, that's how we're building this coalition. And I wouldn't have the support of the immigrant justice community here in Texas if I hadn't sued the governor to stop Senate Bill 4, this anti-immigrant law. I wouldn't have the support of the Sunrise Movement if I wasn't fighting for a Green New Deal and even bringing fossil fuel unions on board. I won the endorsement of the Texas AFL-CIO, even though half of the unions in Houston are fossil fuel unions. Not because they believe in the Green New Deal, but because they've trusted that I was going to bring their voices to the table to fight for workers as part of the shift in our economy and our energy. And so we have a ton of momentum right now. And so this is a perfect moment for this call. Some of you may know we earned the endorsement of Senator Bernie Sanders last week, and that helped us raise $70,000 in 1 week. So we've got this kind of tidal wave of momentum coming. We've got some more big endorsements to announce next week. but we're poised not just to win the runoff, but to beat McCall in November. And I think the key thing I have to do right now, and then I'll pass it back to you, Adam, is I have to prepare for both elections at the same time. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the runoff was delayed. It was supposed to be May 26th, and it was pushed to July 14th. And so we've lost basically 7 weeks to prepare to beat McCall and to raise the resources and build the coalition. So because of the good fundraising we've had recently, our runoff budget is fully funded, but now we need to put the pieces in place to build the national campaign to win in November and to be another one of these progressive highlights nationally. So I'm really looking forward to the questions and this conversation. Thanks again for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. We are going to now, we're really excited to have Greg Casar with us tonight as well. He's a local and Austin City Council member, and he's going to share with you a little bit about why he's so fired up about Mike and why this district needs Mike now. Greg, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Greg Casar. I'm an Austin City Council member and a constituent here in the Texas 10th, and introed Mike on his campaign launch for the first time. And what I want to tell you all a little bit about is just how connected he is to people on the ground. I represent the lowest income district in our city, the most immigrant part of our city. And I met Mike because he was one of our Austin city attorneys. And oftentimes city attorneys are trained to be, more careful, and they're to defend the interests of the city, being the bureaucratic institution, rather than the people that it is that we are supposed to serve and collectively represent. And he was just always thinking about how it was we could use the limited power and authorities that the state of Texas would allow us to have to make things better for the folks who need it the most. And so when a negligent slumlord refused to fix up their apartment building, and it started getting to the place where the fire marshal would say, if it is a tinderbox and people could die, Mike led with us on suing that landlord so that folks could be relocated to a safe place so that landlord would have to pay for every penny of it. He mentioned that he sued the governor on Senate Bill 4, but he didn't mention how sly some of the outcomes were, even though we were facing an overwhelmingly anti-immigrant and right-wing set of court of appeals. He was able to extract in the lawsuit that even though the governor passed a law that said police officers can ask immigrants to show me your papers at a traffic stop, what we were able to extract in that lawsuit, and I credit so much of this to Mike, was that the judges said that law is legal, which is a horrible thing for those judges to have said, but they did concede that immigrants don't have to answer that question. And they have, and of course, most folks just answer questions when they're asked by police officers, but he created an opening for the city council to pass a policy that now says police officers in Austin, if they're gonna ask that question, because the governor has allowed them to by this law, they have to say before asking it, I'm gonna ask you a question. You don't have to answer the following question, and I won't do anything to you if you don't answer. Do you understand? And so it is that kind of opening up in Texas, using all the progressive energy and strength we can muster and organizing we can muster to make things better, especially for communities of color and working class people, using the little powers that we have as a city council or as a city attorney or whatever it is we have, and being able to propel Mike to Congress, where we will then be able to have so much more of an opening as we continue to turn this state, is so important. But I'm somebody that's not on team just turn Texas blue no matter what, because we have been a city that has over-incarcerated people and that has deported lots of people and has massive inequality, even with longstanding Democratic control in our city. I care about making this change and having Democratic members of Congress that are going to make revolutionary changes, because that's what this moment demands. And that's why I think I'd be so excited, not just for y'all to support Mike, but for him to come in with the level of support that he needs to be able to take out Mike McCall, because we purposefully were chopped up and gerrymandered so that we wouldn't wind up with someone like Mike, and it would just be so, it would really just transform the politics of our state for us to start electing folks in Congress when we have this opportunity to elect people that have the level of connection to the ground, the ability to use small openings to make big change, and just an overall nice guy. And so I'm excited that y'all are talking to Mike today and happy to join y'all.
No, thanks, Greg.
Cool. And actually, I'll just make one point. I want to thank Greg for being here along with Mike. We hear a lot of talk these days about the role of elections and movements, right? And ideally, our electoral work is an outgrowth of our movement building. And this past week or so at the PCCC, we were very happy to be working with our friends in the movement colorofchange.org as they were getting together a campaign asking public leaders to say no to political money from the Fraternal Order of Police, which is one of the main groups working against reforms to the police, against police violence right now. And we were thrilled that both Mike and Greg were among the day one crew saying right away, we are in, we stand in solidarity as part of the movement. So I just want to thank both of them for being both, on the ballot, but also part of the movement.
And you ends up setting a standard. And so I signed on to it and a few others did. And once folks were willing to sign on, we're now at a place where the first city where the city council unanimously took the pledge. And so it just goes to show a bit of a theory of if you just get a few folks to step out on something and you have folks that are ready to do that, then you can have more sort of sweeping levels of change. And so just one more pivot from this straight back to Mike.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. Okay, so with that, we have some great questions rolling in. We're going to go to our friend Robert Frame. Robert, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, sir. Robert, what's your question for Mike?
Hey there. Say, as often happens when I write the question in advance, some of the introductory stuff answers parts of it. But I'm curious to see that clearly progressive candidates in congressional races are competitive in places like some Texas districts and others. I'm thinking of Colorado, the Senate race in Colorado. And I understand that this largely reflects my own political stereotyping to assume they wouldn't be really strong candidates in those places. But I think it's not only my own stereotyping. So I'd like to know, Mike, your opinion on what makes candidates like you so competitive in Texas. Maybe this is where some of the stuff you already said is kind of an answer. Hopefully so competitive that you win. But how do your beliefs about the reasoning why you're doing well play out in this race?
Right on. Thank you, Robert. No, that's a key question. I mean, just to give you a sense of the dynamics, even though last cycle I made all this progress in this district, brought a 19% race down to 4%, held McCall to 51%. When I came back this cycle to run it back and finish the job, a lot of those institutional players, the DCCC, who I'm on better terms with now, but these folks were not eager to support me because I didn't fit their theory of what it takes to win a race like this. They think that to win a swing district in Texas against a rich Republican, you need to be a moderate Republican light. Don't say universal health care, say more access to care, things like that. Don't say Green New Deal. Let's do cap and trade market solutions to climate change. But I think the way I've been able to prevail and kind of muscle out these folks who maybe have corporate support or big money support is with our ground game. Greg, and one reason Greg and I get along so well is we're both believers in organizing. And so last cycle, this field program is what carried us so far. And so this cycle, even though I was outspent by over $2 million in the primary, we knocked over 40,000 doors in Austin alone and made tens of thousands of additional voter contacts because our policies are inspiring volunteers, and that enables us to reach the voters. And that allows us, that direct line to the voters is more powerful than any ad somebody can buy. Another factor, especially in the rural and more moderate voters, is that folks have met me. I've been doing the work and I've been listening to folks. So like one rural county where probably this picture behind me has been taken is Washington County, Brenham, which is basically northeast of Houston. Very red county. But the Democratic Club, and there's this separate Democratic women's organization, they love me. And I'll say some of it is just because I show up and I do the work. They like that I used to be a teacher. But I'm also able to connect their struggles with these kind of national policies. So just saying the hashtag Green New Deal, it's not going to get me any support in Brenham. But if we talk about how the Texas Environmental Commission approved a fracking permit next to Lake Somerville, which is where they get all their fresh water. and how basically they have no remedy for that because there's no accountability for water quality or air quality once you get that fracking permit. And how as part of this Green New Deal, we're gonna bring increased scrutiny and we're gonna de-emphasize fracking and we're gonna emphasize renewables, and that's gonna give you clean air and clean water. Basically to talk about these national issues in a local way and make it more palatable to folks. You know, for Medicare for All, when I'm in the rural counties, I talk about how your rural hospital's been closed. And if we had a universal healthcare program, the reimbursements would be there to keep that hospital open. And so I think to be approachable, accessible, to kind of use my organizing tactics to meet people where they are, that's also been a big part of our success.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, folks, let's keep it going. Up next, we have our friend Norbert Hornstein. Norbert, please go ahead and ask Mike your question, sir.
Yeah, so I was wondering, the people that you're running against in your for the primary, how likely is it that they'll enthusiastically support you in the next round were you to win? We've seen in New York, in the Bowman case, for example, that the fact that someone pulled out just before the primary is going to be called looks like it's given Jamal Bowman a real shot at winning. So I think one of the things I'm sort of curious about, how do you see the people who you're running against you? Where will they swing in behind you for the general?
At least 1 out of 2. I mean, both have promised to. We've all promised to. The person who lost, who came in third in the primary, who actually spent the most, she suffered a major negative advertising campaign funded by 314 Action, which is supporting my runoff opponent. They spent like $400,000 going negative on her. And it burned her, I mean, as such things are. But a lot of her supporters have come over to me, and I think that's more important. I mean, in Texas, out of the 3 of us who ran or the 2 of us who were left, I'm the one with the kind of most institutional or organizational support. So even if my runoff opponent didn't support me, I don't think it would make a big difference in the general, but he has pledged and he's told me in private and publicly that he's gonna do it. So I think he'll be there. And we do have this great opportunity to coalesce the Austin and Houston kind of donor classes, the labor councils. There's big unions in Austin and Houston. There's progressive organizations in both places. And because, the Democratic seat in Houston we flipped last cycle, Lizzie Panel Fletcher, Texas 7, is now considered to be safe. I have a real chance to basically pull resources from both regions and be like the next seat we flip. And even today, there's an article about Joe Biden in Texas and the Truman Project, this anti-Trump Republican group, they think that we can flip as many as 4 seats in Texas. And I think my seat, after the Gina Ortiz-Jones seat in Texas 23, I think Texas 10 is the next most likely seat that we can flip in November.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Norbert. Up next,
Rachel, you dropped out.
Oh, I think you might be on top of your mic or something.
Oh, folks, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, Carla, we have a question from Carla Zimler. Carla, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself. Carla, what's your question for Mike? Okay, I will go ahead and ask it for her. So Mike, Carla would like to know, how will you address climate change when the oil and gas industries run the state?
That's a perfect question. Thank you, Carla. Big picture, there's a lot of good bases, foundation to run on climate change in this district in particular. The Texas 10th, we have a strong environmental community in Austin, chapters of the Sierra Club, 350, Sunrise. But then we've got in the middle of the district, in fields like the one behind me, there's a huge coal plant called the Fayette Coal Plant that's municipally owned, poisoning the air and water. Then we've got this fracking that I referenced that's all around the district. And even though on the Houston side, you have all these folks who are invested in oil and gas, we also have the situation where we've had 500-year flood events in the last 5 years. And that sounds absurd, right? But these events that are supposed to only happen once every 500 years have basically happened for 5 years in a row, including Hurricane Harvey. So even when you're talking to the most conservative, like for example, of the unions, the plumbers and pipe fitters, they actually build the pipelines. They're not in favor of the Green New Deal, but they know we have to do something about climate change. And so I think there's a really strong basis for us in Texas to lead on the Green New Deal, because if we can develop consensus here, if I can get unions on board, union by union, to support the Green New Deal, and we can even maybe do prototype programs here to show what the Green New Deal would look like. I think that's how we can be leaders. And so it is true that some of that oil and gas money is going to be supporting Michael McCaul in November. That's crystal clear. But there's enough folks that I can peel off, even within that industry, who know that we can't just put on blinders and pretend this problem isn't here. And then I think the other thing about the Green New Deal that's so powerful for this moment is that it's essentially a national jobs program, right? The Green New Deal says we're going to create millions of good new jobs building a renewable economy. And that's what we need to respond to what is basically the closest version yet, for my generation at least, to the Great Depression. 40 million newly unemployed. How are we going to get these people back to work? Well, we shouldn't send them back to the oil fields. We should use our spending power in the federal government to create new jobs, research and development, retrofit our electrical grids, clean air, clean water, all that kind of stuff. And so I think there's a strong foundation to keep pushing on this. I have to be a little careful to build consensus, not get too far ahead of folks, but I'm actually really excited to keep running on this issue.
Thank you, Mike. Great. And thank you, folks, for all the thoughtful questions. Okay, up next, we have our friend, Carol Winograd. Carol, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself. And what's your question for Mike? Carol?
I think you got to start over, Carol, and unmute yourself.
Are you
Hi, Carol. Okay.
Are you concerned about a large dump of negative ads against you?
In November, or yeah, I mean, yes.
Whenever.
It's not something that I relish, having my name dragged through the mud. I mean, obviously they're just going to call me a socialist, and they're going to hope that does the work. But the way we can overcome it, I mean, first of all, the demographics are trending in this district in the right way. Even though it was gerrymandered one way, it's changed a lot. Beto O'Rourke actually beat Ted Cruz in the Texas 10th by a fraction of a point, and it's moving even further to the left. And so the people are there where it doesn't matter what the Republicans say. If we get our people out, we can win. And I think that's what this organizing campaign is about. But also, a huge advantage I have is that Michael McCaul doesn't show up in person. This is a guy who hasn't held a public event or a town hall in 11 years. Never does he answer unscripted questions. And so I can go into the 9 counties, and this is a big district. It's about 170 miles across at the furthest point, but it's not insurmountably big. And so I can show up everywhere and talk to people one-on-one in small groups, or I guess in this era in Zoom meetings, and look at folks and listen to them and answer their questions. And so I feel like that authenticity, the modeling what actual representation is supposed to be, will also get me a long way. But that said, Carol, I do think I'm gonna have to raise a few $1 million in the general, and I'm gonna build a team that can do that to make sure that I'm on TV with our positive messages. I think this is gonna be a COVID-19 election, and the Republicans in Texas, maybe more than anywhere else, are responsible for killing thousands of people. And I can tie McCaul to that. I'm not gonna relish doing that, but I think that's far worse than anything he can try to put on me.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Mike. Up next, we have our friend Jerry Midas. Jerry, I'm going to go ahead and then ask you to unmute yourself, sir. What's your question for Mike?
My question is kind of twofold. One is, what are the main issues that divide you from your remaining opponent in the primary, and how are you able to use the organization you've built in light of the pandemic? And I presume you can't do door knocking as you had intended. How do you contact voters?
That's right. Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I mean, on policy, my opponent has made it easy. I mean, he's basically like the moderate market-based solution guy to every question. I mean, we had a big debate that was hosted by Harris County, and it was on healthcare. He's a doctor, by the way, and he really pushes himself as an expert in that. But when it came to what's your policy, he said, well, I have something, and basically it was a ratepayer program that had never been put into a bill. So he's using all these talking points about evidence-based solutions and nonpartisan, but he can't even point to a bill that has even been tested or evaluated. And so for me, running on, Medicare for all, he supports basically something, slightly better than the ACA. Me supporting Green New Deal, he's talking about cap and trade. On all these issues, he's coming from this very moderate, cautious approach. And that's not what people want right now, right? For example, we're all in the streets about racial justice and justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And I'm out there at these rallies. I'm speaking. I'm broadcasting from my social media feeds. I'm telling stories of how this impacts my family because I have a Nigerian wife and 2 mixed race children. And so on all these issues, I'm leading on and getting people excited. So that then leads to our ability to contact voters. We haven't been knocking doors since March, but we've made 45,000 phone calls in the runoff. And just the Sunrise Movement alone, because these kids are so powerful and energetic, they're making thousands of calls a week for me. And as we make these calls, we're getting basically a 75% yes rate. So out of the voters we canvass, I think 55% are saying strongest support, and then another 20% are saying lean support. And so now we have identified over 11,000 promised votes for me in a runoff that in 2018 had 18,000 votes total. And so ordinarily with a campaign, if you can even identify 10% of the votes that you need, your win number, you're in decent shape. We've identified over 100% of the votes we need. And so, the union support, the Democratic Club support, the activist support, all these sectors have combined to put us in a great position for GOTV. Now, my opponent, we are thinking that this outside super PAC is going to spend some money on him. And so we're not taking this for granted. We're going to keep doing that work, but we do feel like we're in a great position.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Okay, up next, Mike, our friends, Kate and Phil Villers, it's Kate's birthday, so they couldn't be with us here because they're celebrating at home, but they sent me a question that they'd like me to ask you. So Phil and Kate Villers would like to know, can you tell us a little bit about what your views are on our current policy toward immigrants and asylum seekers?
Well, the current policies are a travesty, contrary to human rights and the spirit of this country and the poem written on the Statue of Liberty, right? And really that issue more than any other is what got me to run last cycle, to see that Michael McCall was a co-author of the Muslim ban. He was the chairman of Homeland Security when they implement the family separation policy. He's been complicit in all these atrocities, these camps. He even takes money from private immigration jails while advocating that they fill more beds, which is code language for basically arresting and incarcerating more immigrants. And so I think we absolutely need comprehensive immigration reform. We need a path to citizenship. We need to help the Dreamers and the TPS folks, but really every worker that's in this country, every family should have a path to citizenship. And we need to close all these camps. There is no need to incarcerate folks while they are waiting their asylum hearing. I mean, 99% of these folks were showing up at hearings just on the previous system that didn't involve, criminal incarceration. And so we need to get back to that, to treating people like human beings, treating folks with dignity and respect, and getting back to what makes this country great, right? Which is our, not to use the Trump terminology, but the wonderful thing about this country is how so many different cultures and people have come together to put their shoulders to the wheel and support each other and innovate and build all these wonderful communities. And so I think we need to honor that diverse history we have, and a big part of that is the immigrant community, and we need to give them the respect they deserve. Thank you.
Great. Up next, we have a question on energy from Rahik Mazumder. Rahik, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to mute yourself, sir. What is your question for Mike? Rahik? Okay, I will ask Mike your question. So Mike, Rahik said, AOC said that the Green New Deal leaves the door open for nuclear power. How do you feel about nuclear energy?
Thank you for that, Rahik. I mean, personally, I don't feel great about nuclear energy, right? I mean, I read the news about Fukushima. I mean, this is a dangerous energy source, and storing the waste is a problem. That said, it's not the first energy source I would come for. I mean, in terms of climate change, it's not our biggest concern. And so to me, as we're building a national consensus and, for example, bringing the labor movement to the table, because we need the labor movement, this is a national jobs program, we need them to get this passed in Congress. And I think we're gonna have to be, I guess, strategic, somewhat pragmatic about which energy sources we need to phase out first. And so to me, it's coal is where we need to start. And stopping fracking, rolling back the basically fossil fuel development would be my first priority. I think that I would support, I guess, using nuclear as one of these transition fuels where we continue to operate these facilities as safely as possible. Maybe we don't need to open new ones, but we continue to use those and rely on those until our grid can be entirely renewable.
Thank you. Great. So we're going to move away from climate now and get into another issue. We have a question from Rex Tyson. Rex, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to mute yourself so you can ask Mike your question. Rex? Rex? Okay, I will ask your question. So Mike, Rex Tyson would like to know what are your thoughts on implementing serious campaign finance reform?
I would absolutely love to do it. I think what we need to do is pass a bill in Congress that takes us all the way up to the edge of what the Supreme Court will allow under its current decisions, right? And so we are dealing with this framework where they've basically said corporations are people and money is speech, and therefore corporations can spend unlimited money through these dark PACs and other vessels. And so I think the key, I have been a voting rights and election law lawyer, and the key is to basically hold hearings and to define as precisely as we can how money does corrupt politics, because we are allowed to regulate money in politics to the extent we can show a quid pro quo type relationship. And I think there's a lot more that Congress can do to push to the edge, to basically limit unlimited campaign contributions, to limit some of these dark money vessels, whether it's 527s or super PACs or hybrid super PACs. There's all these different things going on. And at the same time, I think public Oh, was that Rex coming in? Anyway. So, and then I think another piece is public funding. How can we support that to basically make it so there's a less of a bar to entry to make sure we have good candidates who are running.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think we have time, and I'm going to sneak in one more question. Okay, so Antonio Sustiata would like to know, Mike, how will you work to change racist laws and afford non-white Americans protection from systemic racism and white supremacy assaults?
You're ending with the easiest question, right? So, I come to this question as, someone from the left who recognizes the history of America as founded upon genocide of the Native American people and slavery of the African people, right? And so we have a 401-year history going back to 1619 of slavery and Jim Crow and the war on drugs being the new Jim Crow, as Michelle Alexander wrote. And so we have deep structural racism and white supremacist institutions. And so we need to take these on many fronts. And right now, there's fortunately a lot of room to talk about these things. And I think we need to push beyond some of these, I guess, more quick fix police reforms, although, I'm all for banning chokeholds, that's fine. Banning chokeholds isn't going to save lives in the aggregate. I'm all for having a database of offenders, but I don't know how much that's going to move the needle. Community control of the police, that's something I would like to see more of to make sure there's real accountability. I think getting this police union money out of politics so they can't basically force local officials to accede to their contract demands, that's a big thing. But we really need to confront white supremacy and racism head on. If I can tell a brief story, Rachel. So George Floyd was killed after the shop that he was shopping at, I guess he was buying cigarettes, called to say there was a forgery in progress. He was basically killed because he attempted to spend a $20 bill that was found to be counterfeit. And I have in my possession today one of these bills. I'll show it to you here. And if I flash it, it looks like a 20, right? Now, why do I have this bill? My daughter is a Girl Scout. She's 8 years old. She was selling Girl Scout cookies this spring. And someone bought a bunch of cookies and paid with this bill. They might not have even known it was a fake bill. My wife went to deposit the money because, with Girl Scouts, you buy the cookies first, then you sell them to get paid back. And so she felt the bill. It doesn't, it doesn't feel right. The taper's not right. It's got some markings on it that are obvious once you look at them. And so she didn't deposit it. We took the loss. And this bill was on my desk when I heard how George Floyd was killed, why the police were called. And it made me really think about it because, if I had gone to the store to buy some cigarettes, I don't smoke cigarettes, but if I had gone to buy some candy or a soda with this bill, 99 times out of 100, nothing would have happened, right? There's no chance my neck would have been on the pavement. There's no chance that I would have even been arrested. It would have been called a mistake, right? I would, oh, I didn't know, sorry. But George Floyd's black, and so he ends up dead. And for me to think a little bit more, because my 8-year-old daughter who was selling these cookies, she's black, or she's perceived as black, right? She has an African mother. And, you know, if an 8-year-old goes to buy some candy with a fake bill, probably not going to get harassed. Maybe, you know, the shop owner would say, no, you can't use that. But if she's 10, would that become an issue? 12 years old? I mean, at what point does your skin color alone make you a threat? And so for me to think about how even my own daughter could have been subjected to something very similar to George Floyd, or maybe in a couple of years she would have, it just brings home for me how deep this problem is. Like, how is it that a police officer who has all these instances of abuse, misconduct, is allowed to be on the force? How many of his peers knew that he thought of black people as subhuman? You know, those other 3 officers who watched, you know, Congressman Ted Lieu said it, it's like, it takes a village of bad cops for an incident like this to happen. And so I think we need to get down to the roots, you know, of our economic system, like the idea that a disproportionate number of the people who are dying from COVID-19 are black men and black women. The fact that a disproportionate number of our frontline workers who are exposed to coronavirus are black men and black women. I mean, they are suffering more risk at every level of our system, whether it's the economic system, the policing system. And so we really need to grapple with this. We need to call white supremacy what it is. We have to fight it, we have to confront it, and we have to try to root it out. And so with public safety, I think we need to re-envision public safety. I'm not going to be campaigning on, you know, hashtag defund the police, because I don't know that the voters I'm speaking to even know what that means. But when you call the police, there's no reason why a person with a gun and a badge needs to be responding to a lot of these incidents. A lot of these things could require a trauma intervention team or a conflict resolution team, medical services. I mean, the idea that the average police officer might make 1 felony arrest a year, that puts in perspective, like, this idea of anarchy without the police. Well, I mean, sure, there's a deterrent effect, but I think we can really examine how we're funding public safety, how we're looking at a fundamental equality, because if you give someone a job, if you put a roof over their heads, if you make sure they can see a doctor, I don't think they're going to be committing these crimes. I think that by itself is going to reduce the crime rate and create more stability in our community. And so to me, we need this holistic, comprehensive social justice approach, and we need to also take on white supremacy head on.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for sharing that with us. So I'm going to kick it over back to Adam to share a few last thoughts with you. But before I do that, I wanted to share a nice note that someone sent me. So he said, I am Rafael Jesus Gonzalez, poet laureate from Berkeley, California, an old friend and colleague of Mike Siegel and his father. Mike and I work together in the Alameda County Office of Education, Peace, Education Network. I would just like to endorse Mike as an activist committed to the earth, justice, and peace. So thank you. I thought that was nice. So thank you for that. And Mike, Wendy Fox just said, hello. Amazing story to end on. So grateful. So thank you, Wendy. So let me go ahead and pass it back to our co-founder, Adam Green, to share a few of his last thoughts. Adam?
Cool. Thanks, Rachel. Let me actually start with that last point from Wendy Fox. For anybody with your video on, I would actually just like to ask you to raise your hand if you think that last answer from Mike was extremely powerful. I'd just like to see a lot of hands in the air. Mike, thank you for sharing that. And you know, I gotta say, you know, there's listening to Mike on this Zoom call, I'm reminded a lot of our friend Katie Porter and our friend Mike Levin, who ran last cycle and were really unknown entities nationally when they were in their primary. And we would be telling people, oh, they're awesome, trust us. And you know, we had to like kind of say it 10 times. Actually, one more show of hands. How many people here know Katie Porter? Anybody? All right, she's making big waves now. And you know, as a group that does half election work and half issue advocacy work and who works with Congress a lot, one thing I can just testify to is that having someone not from a blue district, but from a red to blue district, who is willing to challenge power like Mike displayed on this call today. Challenge corporate power on the economic front, to challenge racism, systemic racism, white supremacy, that type of power on the racial justice front, and to challenge forces that are aligned against our democracy, as he's done in the courts. That is so powerful for bringing other red to blue people along with us, and through that, having the imprint of House leadership and actually getting a vote on things we care about. I really would say to you, if you are impressed by Mike today, and if you're one of many people out there who can't give to every race or can't give the same amount to every race, might give $10 to one race, but know that you can do 100 to another, might do 100 to some races, but know that you can do 1,000 to another. I would really urge you to consider this race one of the ones where you go in and go bigger on, because we are within grasp of victory of not just winning the primary, but flipping this red district. You've heard from Mike. He will be one of our best feet forward, right up there with Katie Porter in terms of being a powerful red to blue voice on the inside. So that's really all I can say. Mike, thank you so much for the vibrant campaign you're running, which is really a reflection of your values and the life that you've been living. And I guess I would just ask you to share any final thoughts. If people gave today, what would you do with that money in the final couple of weeks before the election?
Thank you so much, Adam, for this opportunity and for everyone being on this call. Great to be with you. Really, if you're investing today, you're investing in us, positioning ourselves to win in the fall. This terminology, red to blue, with the DCCC, it means something, right? And I'm behind in terms of timing. And so to the extent I can be ready on July 15th to show, okay, I'm ready to put a pole in the field. I've built my team of consultants and staff. We are ready to go to be on TV in Houston, be on TV in Austin. We're going to run the comprehensive field program that no one's seen before, but we're also going to have all the conventional elements of a high profile campaign. I mean, that's what you're investing in now. After July 14th, after I win the nomination, some other folks are going to come on board, but I need to have those resources to go right then so I can turn on a dime, not lose a week, and build this campaign to beat McCall. This guy's got $300 million. He's married to the heiress to the Clear Channel fortune, now iHeartMedia. He's got no shortage of resources. And so we need to be ready to go, full guns blaring, if I could say. And with your support, we will be there. So thank you so much, Adam, for letting me have this chance.
Thank you, folks. So thank you so much, Adam. Thank you so much, Mike, for being here with us tonight, and Greg. But most importantly, thank you to everyone on the call with us tonight. We could not do this without you. So if you can consider chipping in, whatever you feel comfortable with, please do, and know that it will be used strategically and smartly. So thank you to everyone. Please stay safe. Stay well, stay positive, and please keep your eyes open for an invite to the next event, Meet the Candidates event next Wednesday. We will see you next week. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Bye.